Hello, thank you for joining us this evening. Please stay on the line. We're going to give the call a moment to populate and we'll be getting started. Hi, thank you for your patience. Thank you for joining us. We will be getting started in just a moment. We're allowing the call to populate for a minute and then we will get going. Hi, welcome. Thank you so much for being here this evening. We're going to give the call another few seconds to populate and we will get started. All right. Good evening, welcome, and thank you so much for joining ADL, JCPA, and JFNA for tonight's joint reception. Please note that this evening's call is being recorded. In order to maintain focus on our speakers, all participants' mics and videos have been turned off. We are pleased to offer closed captioning for this webinar. To turn your captioning on or off, please click the closed caption button on the bottom of your Zoom program screen. You can also use the up arrow next to the button to adjust the size of the captions as you need them. And now at this time, I'm pleased to introduce President of the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College, Rabbi Deborah Waxman.
Good evening. This Shabbat, we conclude the book of Exodus. We've moved from the individual narratives of our patriarchs and our matriarchs in Genesis to the formation of the nation of Israel. And deliverance from slavery is a foundational part of this story. It's essential to remember that the Israelites were not freed from slavery to do anything they wanted. After liberation, they marched directly to Mount Sinai to receive the Torah and to enter into covenantal relationship with Yud He Vav He. As their descendants, we must remember that we were redeemed to serve the highest principles, which we must constantly seek to discern. We were redeemed to be in covenantal relationship with each other, with the divine. The political philosopher Isaiah Berlin asserted that there are two concepts of liberty, positive and negative. Psychologist Barry Schwartz explains, negative liberty is freedom from constraint, from being told to do what to do by others. Positive liberty is freedom to. It's the availability of opportunities to be the author of your own life and to make it meaningful and significant. Often these two kinds of liberties go together, but they need not always. The freedoms enshrined in America's founding documents have been inspiring for most Jews. We have been free to be Jewish however we want. And America has been a place where Jews can participate fully in broader society as Jews, to contribute our gifts, to take advantage of what is on offer. We have experienced both freedom from and freedom to. And our experience as a minority community has aligned with a broader American vision of freedom. In 1941, Franklin Delano Roosevelt laid out what he saw as 4 fundamental universal freedoms: freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. With this speech, FDR united Americans as they prepared to face their greatest challenges: recovery from the Depression and entry into a world war. We have seen a profound imbalancing of these freedoms in recent years, especially during the coronavirus pandemic, when individuals are asserting liberty as a justification for not wearing masks, and a surging racialized nationalism has fueled a long-standing belief that freedom is limited only to a white Christian majority. Exodus begins with Moses encountering the burning bush, discerning the voice of the divine, and taking up the fight for what was just and liberatory in his time. It ends this week with the 5th parsha on building the Mishkan, the place where the holy presence of the divine might dwell. We face the greatest challenges of our generation: reckoning with structural racism, restoring the physical and economic health of our country, combating attacks on American democracy from within, reestablishing a shared sense of communitas, confronting the climate crisis with equity and creativity. It's our responsibility to discern, as Moses did, what is just and liberatory. We must dedicate ourselves toward effecting an equitable pandemic recovery, dismantling systemic racism, working for climate justice. We have to do so in a covenantal fashion with a commitment to relationship and with an eye toward cultivating holiness like that which surrounded the Mishkan. We must act as heirs of our legacy of liberation to ensure that we fulfill the opportunities and obligations of our freedom as Jews, as Americans, as leaders, to create a world where all can flourish.
Thank you for those beautiful words, Rabbi Waxman. We have a full list this evening of representatives joining us, and I'm very pleased to invite our first representative up this evening. Can I invite, please, Senator Benjamin Cardin to please turn on your video. There you are, and please go ahead.
Well, Deb, first of all, thank you very much. Rabbi Waxman, you laid out the agenda. We're supposed to talk about what our agenda is for the 117th Congress. I think you laid it out very well. It's good to be here with my colleagues. I congratulate ADL for the incredible work that you do, the Jewish Council for Public Affairs, and the Jewish Federations. We helped you a great deal today. I know my colleagues from the House that are on the call. I congratulate them on the vote that just took place in the House of Representatives that passed the American Rescue Plan that now will be signed by President Biden this week. That'll move us towards what Rabbi Waxman pointed out, and that is a more just society. When I look at what our agenda is based upon, I start with a hearing we had in Senate Foreign Relations today on the state of democracies. And we have issues, we have challenges. A rise of nationalism has also seen a rise of hate, a rise of anti-Semitism, and we need to address that. I am the special representative on anti-Semitism, racism, and intolerance in the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. And I also serve on the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. And I can tell you, we have a challenge, and we have to confront the rise of anti-Semitism and racism in this country. And that's very much part of our agenda. President Biden has laid out Build Back Better, and we're talking about Build Back Better and Fairer to deal with the systemic challenges we have in America on racism, on education and healthcare, and the economics and housing, and the list goes on and on and on. But one additional area is to build back stronger globally and to work with the international community. And there we really do need to restore America's global leadership, working with our partners, strengthening the ties between the United States and Israel, not just the bilateral ties that are very strong, but to help make sure that Israel is not isolated globally, which we have seen happen so often in international organizations. So this is all part of our agenda for this Congress. I was told I had 1 to 2 minutes. I think I stuck within that time frame. I hope it's a good example for my colleagues, but we look forward to working with you in this Congress. We've gotten off to a great start with the American Rescue Plan. We have a lot more on our agenda, including immigration. So there's a big, long agenda list that I'm sure you all are going to be interested in, and we look forward to working with you.
Thank you so much, Senator. You did great on time. We appreciate it. Thank you. Next up, I'd like to invite Andy Levin, please.
Thank you so much, Deb. Instead of unmuting, I clicked myself right out of the meeting. It's so good to see you and everybody. I really appreciate this opportunity to be with ADL, JCPA, and Jewish Federations of North America to pop in and join you for a couple minutes. I'll just mention a couple priorities that I have, that one that I don't think others will, and one that I think is universal for all of us. But first, a little piece of breaking news. We had Secretary of State Blinken appear before the House Foreign Affairs Committee today. He gave us so much time And he really spoke up for the special relationship between the United States and Israel and full support of the United States for Israel's security. And it was a really great thing. First, let me mention Burma. I'm a lifelong human rights advocate. I've been working on these issues for years. I'm really concerned about the coup. The Tatmadaw has dealt a really serious blow to really the nascent Burmese democracy. It was a fragile flower. But I have faith in the people of Burma. I have faith in the international community and the United States working together to demonstrate to the Burmese military that reverting to authoritarian rule is unacceptable. And I just want to give a shout out to our Jewish community members who are organizing to protect the rights of the Rohingya refugees and that they should be citizens and have their life in Burma. On February 25th, the House Foreign Affairs Committee voted to pass my bipartisan resolution on the coup with Congressman Steve Chabot. And I hope we pass it through the House and the Senate, and I appreciate your activism. Secondly, and universally in our community, I want to talk about hate crimes. It's so disturbing to see the increase in hate crimes. It's a huge concern to all of us. Hate crimes in the US surged to the highest level in more than a decade in 2019, the last year we have full records for. And that year also recorded the highest number of hate-motivated killings. And in 2019, anti-Semitic incidents in particular reached an all-time high. We know that thanks to the great work of Jonathan and ADL. In the last Congress, I was a proud co-sponsor of the No Hate Act, which seeks to promote better hate crimes data collection, as well as a more informed approach to hate crime prevention. And I'm going to support the bill again, make sure we pass it into law, and just fight against anti-Semitism and all forms of white supremacy and hate crime in this country. We've got a huge agenda as demonstrated by the American Rescue Plan that we passed today, lifting 50% of the kids of this country who are in poverty out of poverty and so much more. But I just wanted to hit on those couple things. Thank you for having me and us, and I look forward to seeing you in person next year. Take care.
Thank you so much, Representative Levin. We appreciate your being here today, and I appreciate your words. Next up, I'd like to invite Representative Kim Schreier, please.
Let's see if I can.
You got it. I believe in you.
It says I can't undo my video. It says I can't start it by myself.
All
The
right,
host has stopped it. So I can be a ghost.
Let's see, tech team, can we help out?
Start my video. I just got the.
There we go.
Perfect. There we go.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. It's fun to see my friends. I think my video still started. I got the notice twice. And thank you, Rabbi Waxman. That was just a beautiful opening. It gave me a lot to think about. And I hope that today we have given a lot of people big freedom from worry by providing cash payments and even more to families with children, by providing help for people who have lost their jobs, by having nutrition programs so people will have freedom from hunger. And one of my favorites, Susan Dalbeni and Rosa DeLauro's child tax credit, because having that and having a reform of how the child tax credit works means, as Andy, my friend just said, that half of children who are currently living in poverty will no longer be living in poverty. But it also has benefits for 93% of the kids in this country. And so wherever you are on that income spectrum, whether it is getting food on the table, it helps you. If you're in the lowest 10% that never got help before, it helps you. If you are in the middle class and you are having trouble affording daycare, and so you're deciding whether you can work or not, it helps you. And so these are just big wins and freedoms from worry, in addition to all of the money for testing and vaccination programs that will get us back to hopefully the freedom to live a normal life. I am one of just 2 women doctors in Congress, the first pediatrician, so you know where my priorities are. I just talked about some of them. And just like my colleagues, I would just love to touch on January 6th and frankly, the last 5 years of the steady drumbeat of white nationalism, intolerance, racism that really came to a head on January 6th. And of course, that was all kind of masquerading as freedom and liberty. But the reality was that it was all rooted in white nationalism, racism, bigotry, and everything that is hateful in this country. So I want to thank you for your commitment to fighting hatred and bigotry and anti-Semitism at every turn. I join with you in that priority because we all want our children to grow up in a country where everybody is respected. And just because January 6th is gone does not mean that those undercurrents of hate are gone. And we still have a lot to address in this country to root out hatred and to strive for equity. So I'm delighted to be here. Thank you again for having me, and an early happy Passover to all of you.
Thank you so much, Representative Schreier, and a very happy Passover to you as well. Next up, I'd like to invite Representative Ted Deutsch to please turn on his video.
Great, thanks. Greetings, everyone. It's such a treat to be with you. And it's a really momentous day, and I am committed to working with my colleagues to take on extremists and to fight anti-Semitism. And January 6th was really painful for all of us, and it takes hard work from all of us to stand up against the kind of hatred and anti-Semitism that we saw literally people wearing on their sleeve in the Capitol that day. But this is a momentous occasion that we're all meeting during, and I want to emphasize that. All of you who are tuning in care about politics. You have all chosen to get involved in politics for your own reasons. But for those of us who do this, and for I think most of you, think back to why we care. When there's a big problem, we want to be able to come together to solve it. When there are challenges, we want to be able to meet them. And that's what we did today. What we did today was an enormous step forward in lifting kids out of poverty, in helping the hungry, in ensuring that more people have access to vaccines and to healthcare generally. We're providing relief to people who desperately need it. This has been a really, really long and challenging year for so many of us. And today we came together to pass legislation that is going to help us get through it once and for all. And as we look back on the year and we mourn the losses and the needless loss of life in so many instances, and we think about the ways that our country was made worse, today is a day to think about the way that we're going to work together to make the country stronger, better, more committed to fighting hatred, more committed to working together to address the big challenges that we face, and to do it together. For more than a year, I've been telling my constituents back home that as hard as things are, we're going to get through it, and we're going to do it together. Today was the clearest example of that, and I'm really, really proud to join you on this day in particular, to thank you for all of your work, your advocacy, and everything you do to make our community and the country stronger. Thanks so much.
Oh, thank you, Representative Deutsch. We appreciate your being here. Next up, I'm pleased to welcome Representative Jan Schakowsky.
Okay, there I am. Thank you so much for inviting me, and this is right on topic for me. I chair a subcommittee on consumer protection and commerce, which deals with we had a hearing last September called Mainstreaming Extremism, Social Media's Role in Radicalizing America. And we examine the different ways in which extremism undermines the public's faith in our democracy and in institutions, and it sows violence and divide. And so we're absolutely working on this issue, and it really coincides with this issue of Burma, which is also called Myanmar, that my dear colleague raised. And we know that on Facebook, it actually helped fuel the genocide in Myanmar that killed so many of the Rohingya people, who are now 1 million plus in Bangladesh in very, very bad conditions. And so the role of making, my role of helping to hold accountable the platforms that can be for good and for bad, are held responsible for the violence and for the divisions that are created. So my subcommittee is going to be absolutely working on that. I wanted to raise one other issue that you probably haven't heard too much about. I call it vaccine apartheid. You know, we all talk about we have to crush this virus, and I think the president is doing a good job in speeding up vaccines to everyone, making them available. But in poor countries, in middle income, low income countries, this is not true. There are many countries right now who have not even had one shot. And so a group of countries led by India and South Africa are asking for a limited time opportunity to be able to produce their own vaccines. They've gone to the World Trade Organization asking for a waiver from the TRIPS program. It's the TRIPS waiver. And the problem has been that the United States and a few other countries, rich countries, have so far been silent on this issue, and Big Pharma has been trying to protect their intellectual property rights and not allow these countries to have a waiver to produce their own vaccines. So I have a letter that has gone to the president. Some of the major groups like Doctors Without Borders have a letter from 400 different organizations asking for a waiver approval from the United States in order to make sure that everyone has a vaccine. This is not really all about just being good-hearted souls. Vaccines proliferating anywhere puts people everywhere at risk. So I hope you'll consider, and I can get you that information, of joining that group asking for a waiver for poor countries. And I will yield back and thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you so much, Representative Schakowsky. We appreciate your being here and always your passion. Next up, I'd like to invite Representative Alan Lowenthal to please turn on his camera.
I'm there, I'm on. Thank you so much. It's so nice to be here with everyone. I want to thank ADL and the Jewish Council for Public Affairs and the Jewish Federation for inviting me and all of us. And it's great to see my other colleagues. It's so wonderful to be together as we start a new Congress, you know. But we have, as already pointed out, serious work that we all have to do. It's going to involve all of us. You know, we all lived through, either directly or watched it, the events of January 6th, and we've seen the continuing rise of domestic terrorism. But COVID-19 has also added its own unique issue to this, and that has been the increased attacks and hate crimes against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. They have been attacked. Obviously, there's been, as well as we've all seen, the rise of anti-Semitic tropes and conspiracy theories and so forth. And so we have a lot of work to do to confront hatred and bigotry, as my colleagues have said. And so it's been a pleasure to listen to it. But we also have to understand we're in a great opportunity at this time to work together to promote peace, to promote tolerance, to promote engagement and inclusivity, both here and abroad. I'm going to raise one issue that hasn't. I think we have a historic opportunity to recalculate our approach in the Middle East, to emphasize diplomacy and to seek a long-term peace. I think it's within our grasp. But I also want to say that I think that I work in a community that's tremendously impacted by climate change. I'm going to be working on issues on promoting zero emission, especially because I represent the port areas. I want to work on zero emission freight systems. I think we all have to do our part to deal with this climate crisis. I also want to, I have a bill that I'm working on too, which is called it's really breaking our dependence on plastic pollution. And I think there's just lots and lots of things to do together. And so I'm really glad to be here. I want to thank you for inviting me, and I'm so excited listening to my colleagues to hear what they want to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative Lowenthal. We're so pleased you could be here this evening. All right, next up, I'd like to invite Representative Suzanne Bonamici to please turn on your video.
Perfect. There we go. Welcome. Thank you, everyone, so much. Thank you, Deb. Thank you to JCPA, ADL, and the Jewish Federations. It's really wonderful to be here with so many great colleagues tonight as part of this discussion. And as Senator Cardin and my colleagues noted, the past few years, we've really seen such a troubling rise in domestic extremism and racism and anti-Semitism. I think that's at the top of our minds as we experience the attack on January 6th as well. And how the pandemic, it's been a tough year for everybody, and how the pandemic has really exacerbated so many existing inequities. And we know we have a lot of challenges ahead. It's wonderful to hear my colleagues. But in the short term, we definitely need accountability and investigations and people speaking out against injustice and discrimination. But in the long term, a really powerful way to combat extremism and inequity is through education. And that is really my passion. On the Education and Labor Committee, I chair the Subcommittee on Civil Rights and Human Services, where we focus on making sure that all students have access to a well-rounded education that empowers them to reach their full potential and lead to greater opportunity. But we also, today is a wonderful day because we're making so many strides in so many of these areas. We must address food and housing insecurity, also exacerbated by the pandemic. Reunite kids who are separated from their parents at the border, and pass humane immigration reform. And as Rabbi Waxman noted, address the climate crisis in a way that recognizes we need a just transition, because certain communities of color, low-income communities, have been disproportionately affected. So it's beginning to feel like there's light at the end of the tunnel after this past year and so many issues, but we're not out of the tunnel yet, and we have to continue our efforts to restore our moral leadership in the world. But there can be a brighter future ahead, and particularly for our children. And it's wonderful that we're celebrating the American Rescue Plan today. So my temple in Portland, Congregation Beth Israel, we always do a wonderful MLK service. And we recently had our service, of course, our Shabbat service virtually. So I introduced a recording of the late Congressman John Lewis. He was our keynote speaker at this MLK service in 2014. And even though so much has changed in those 7 years, and even though we miss John Lewis every day, his words really continue to resonate and inspire, because he used to say to us quite frequently, never give up, never give in, keep the faith. And he would say, stand up and speak up. in the face of injustice. And I know that's what all of you do. So thank you. Thank you for your advocacy and your engagement. I'm really grateful to be part of the conversation this evening.
Thank you so much, Representative Bonamici. Those were beautiful words and always lovely to remember the great John Lewis. Okay, next up, I'd like to invite Representative Dean Phillips to please turn on his camera.
Hey, thanks, Deb, and thanks to the ADL and JCPA and the JFNA. You caught me in the middle of eating a Hamantaschen provided by Tammy Raskin, our dear friend and colleague. And our other friend and colleague, John Yarmouth, said at a press conference yesterday that everything has already been said. It just hasn't been said by everybody. So I'm going to make my remarks brief and simply say thank you. The work that all of you are committed to, that you put so much energy and tears and sweat into, has never been more important. My great-grandparents told me the stories that so many of us have heard. I used to poo-poo them, but they were right. Threats to Israel, threats to Jews in the United States, and even the fragility of the United States itself, all have been laid bare in the last number of months, as we all know. And I just want to say thank you to my friends and colleagues on the call, Democrats and Republicans, and to all of you who engage in this work every day. And a reminder that hate is hate, whether it's towards us in the form of anti-Semitism, whether it's racism, xenophobia, homophobia. Hate is hate, and we have this particular responsibility to unite behind eradicating it. So in that spirit of hopefulness, I say thank you, heartfelt gratitude, and a good Pesach to all, and look forward to seeing you all soon face to face. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Representative Phillips, and a Zissen Pesach to you as well. Next up, I'm pleased to invite Debbie Wasserman Schultz to please turn on your camera.
Sorry, I was trying, had a little trouble. Thank you so much to JCPA, JFNA, and ADL, three organizations that I have been so proud to work with for so many years. Many of you know that I was the first Jewish member, first Jewish woman to represent Florida in the United States Congress. And that responsibility always weighs heavily on me, and it results in me thinking about and making policy through a distinctly Jewish lens. And because of the anti-Semitism that we have really seen raise its ugly head, a responsibility for us is to use our platform to fight against the rising tide of anti-Semitism, both in the United States and across the world. And whether it's Charlottesville to the attack on our nation's capital, there has been and there continues to be a violent resurgence of anti-Semitism. The January 6th insurrectionists were fueled clearly by vicious conspiracy theorists and white supremacy, and they were unabashed in their anti-Semitism. Some of them even wore clothing that displayed Camp Auschwitz or 6 million wasn't enough. And we have to take swift and forceful action to combat the anti-Semitism and racism that drives domestic extremism in this country and also around the world. Last year, I was proud to co-found with Ted Deutsch and a number of parliamentarians from around the world, the newly established Interparliamentary Task Force to Combat Online Anti-Semitism. And that has brought together legislators from the US, Canada, the UK, Israel, and Australia to coordinate efforts to address the global nature of online anti-Semitism and hate. Amid this global pandemic, when more people than ever before are online, the urgency to address these issues is even greater. We have to demand real global accountability and strong social media safeguards. We have to adopt an international strategy as well as be truly committed global allies to confront online anti-Semitism. And so through this task force, we're going to be developing strategies and concrete policies to hold social media companies accountable and prevent extremists from using these platforms to recruit and plan violent attacks like the January 6th insurrection. Actually, ADL has been a part of our initial hearings already. And through this task force, we are going to make sure that we can combat hate and bring communities together to address shared concerns. I'm also proud that I was able to help form, and I think all of my colleagues here are a member of the Congressional Caucus on Black-Jewish Relations. And I'm also one of the co-chairs of the Latino Jewish Caucus. Through accountability and honest conversation and actively working to address the root causes of divisions, these are caucuses that can help mitigate the bigotry and hatred that permeates many areas in society. We have to retie the binds that have been forged over generations between our communities, and using the platform we have in Congress is so essential to be able to do that. And lastly, I just want to touch on our Holocaust survivors. That's another major priority for us, to honor and safeguard the Holocaust survivor community, provide them with comfort and a respectful quality of life, dignity, and to be able to age in place. And my district is among the largest populations of Holocaust survivors in the country. And as a community that bravely faced the terror of concentration camps, the trauma of fleeing Nazi occupation, we have to make sure that more than 80 years later, there is more that we can and that we must do to all who survived those atrocities. And the Holocaust Survivor Assistance Program remains a critical lifeline for our country's remaining Holocaust survivors and their families and providers. So I'm proud to share with you that the FY21 appropriations bill included $5 million for this program, thanks to JFNA, who's been an incredible advocate for that program. And in FY22, I'll be pushing to include $10 million. That program ensures that Holocaust survivors are able to live in dignity in their homes and communities. It also addresses the emerging needs of other diverse aging populations impacted by trauma. As a senior member of the Appropriations Committee, I'll continue to lead that effort to fund this program. I know I'm joined by all my colleagues here, so we can grant our Holocaust survivors the utmost peace and quality of life in their remaining years. Thank you for bringing us together, all three organizations, and look forward to continuing to work with you. And yes, Aziz and Pesach to everyone.
Aziz and Pesach to you, and thank you for your extraordinary leadership and dedication. It's truly impressive. Thank you so much. Next up, oh, he beat me to it. Representative Josh Gottheimer, thank you so much for turning on your camera. You were on it.
Thank you so much, and it's an honor to follow Debbie. I'll go in the Dean tradition and try to keep it very quick. But I just want to make a couple quick points, if I may. First, thank you so much for taking the time to bring us all together. It's an honor to join the ADL and the Jewish Council for Public Affairs and the Jewish Federations tonight. And just to thank you for all you do to fight every single day. I'm just so grateful for it and what you do to help our communities and to stand up to hate and to fight anti-Semitism, but really just to give back and following, of course, to Kinulam and to heal the world. And that's, I know, what you're all committed to. And I just want to say thank you. Secondly, right now going on in one of my communities in the rural area is a town hall with local officials who refuse to put out a statement against hate. And they're fighting over what the definition of hate is, instead of coming together and saying that regardless of what it looks like, whether it's anti-Semitism, whether it's from the far left, whether it's from the far right, wherever it comes from, that we should stand up to hate. And I think as a community, especially after the thugs that attacked the Capitol on the 6th and what happened, we should be consistent to stand up and speak out against it, because anti-Semitism has reared its ugly head everywhere in the history of the world. And it's up to us to make sure that regardless of where we sit on the spectrum, we stand up together and for one point to say we may not allow it to exist anywhere we see it, and we should call it out whenever we see it. And I think that binds us together as a people because of what we've been through as a shared common experience. It's why I will continue, whether it's on Homeland Security or as a member of Congress and on every committee I sit, and whatever organization I'm part of, like I know my colleagues do, we need to call it out when we see it, just like you do. And so thank you so much for your fight and for helping us stand up. And I'm just so grateful to you and to my colleagues. And of course, Zis and Pesach all.
Thank you so much, Representative Gottheimer. We're so glad you were able to be here. And of course, Aziz and Pesach, back to you. Next up, I'm pleased to welcome Representative Sarah Jacobs. Please turn on your camera.
Hello, so great to be here with you all tonight. I would say it's great to see so many friendly faces, but it's great to see so many friendly names in a box. And I will look forward to getting to see you all very soon. And I wanted to echo what my colleagues have said about the American Rescue Plan. I think COVID relief has really been at the top of all of our lists. And I'm so grateful that we were able to deliver this much needed assistance to the American people. Prior to coming to Congress, I founded an initiative to end childhood poverty in San Diego. And so one of my top priorities here in Congress has been addressing childhood poverty and ensuring every family has affordable and accessible childcare. So I'm particularly excited, as many of my colleagues have noted, about the child tax credit and the allocation of $39 billion for childcare to help working families. I serve on the Foreign Affairs and Armed Services Committees, so I'm also really focused on rebuilding America's standing around the world, re-engaging with our allies, responsibly ending the forever wars, and ensuring that our military families get the support that they need and deserve. Of particular note tonight is ensuring that we eradicate extremism in the military, and I was proud to lead a letter with my colleague, Ruben Gallego, to the Department of Defense to make sure that they were using all of the tools that they had to make sure that they were holding to account anyone who was affiliated with the military who was part of the January 6th attack. And finally, as a millennial, I think I'm the third youngest member of Congress at the moment, although the youngest Jewish member. I am particularly interested in legislating around emerging technologies. And I know my colleague Jan Schakowsky talked about social media's role in Burma. We all know the role it played in radicalization leading to January 6th. And I think it's really important that we think holistically about how we create foundational roles so that these technological tools are creating the society we want to live in. So thank you again for having all of us here tonight. Great to be with you, and happy early Passover.
And wishing the same to you, Representative Jacobs. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us this evening. All right, Representative Stephen Cohen, I'd like to welcome you to please turn on your camera. Oh, Representative Cohen, you are still on mute, my friend.
I am unmuted now. Hello. So Elie Wiesel said that the purpose of Judaism is not to make the world more Jewish, but to make it more human. And of course, he was right. And he was right about everything, I think. And that's what we do as Democrats in Congress, and that's what we should be doing. The bill we just passed, a phenomenal $1.9 trillion rescue bill, will not help that many Jews. The bill that President Trump and the Republicans had as their first bill, the tax bill, which also used budget reconciliation, helped a lot of Jews because 90-something% of the monies went to the upper 1% in the income strata, and like 80% went to the upper 2 or 3%. But that's not what Jews are about, and not what Jews should be about. Just like Elie Wiesel said, we're about making the world more human and not giving more to those who have enough, but giving enough to those who don't have enough. And that's what this bill did. It gave children, poor people, middle class, lower income people more, and it gave them a chance. Nutrition, help with rent, hopefully healthcare in the 12 miserly states that have not expanded their Medicaid to take ACA monies. They'll take them now and have money to boot. So, we as Jews and as Democrats have so much to work for and to try to accomplish. People have talked about hate crimes. I think Elie Wiesel said it. People who hate anybody hates everybody. And it seems like everybody who hates Jews. So we naturally are inclined towards helping people who are the subjects of oppression and hate and who are the underdogs, because we've been that for so many years. When Merrick Garland was before the Senate, he said that he thought back upon his ancestors who came to this country and that they were given a haven, an opportunity. And he felt like he had a duty to give back to, because of what was given his ancestors and accordingly him. And we all have that because we came here. We're not many of us were here with the Indians. Not many of us were here on those ships that came over, the Mayflower and the Pinto and all those ships. So we've got to be concerned about immigrants. Most of us, our ancestors were immigrants and benefited from highest. And we have to continue to look out for people who are in need of aid and help. And we need to support Israel, and not support Israel like the evangelical Christians do, because we're going to go back there and there's going to be the apocalypse, but support Israel because Israel is a country that has given shelter to people who were tempted to be obliterated from the face of the earth by the scourge of Nazism. So I'm Congressman, I'm chairman of the subcommittee on Constitution, Civil Liberties, and Civil Rights. That's what I take great pride in. When I was a freshman in 2006, I was the only congressman who chose judiciary as their first choice. Most people were wanting whatever other committees there were, but I like the idea of looking out for people's rights and for the Constitution. And I'm proud to have done that. I got to this position, and I appreciate all of what you do, and thankful to be here. Sei gesund.
Sei gesund. Thank you so much, Representative Cohen. I'm busting out so much Yiddish on this call. It's bringing me a lot of nachas, a lot of joy. With that, I am pleased to invite Representative Luria to please keep your camera on.
Well, good evening, everyone, and it's so great to join you and all of my colleagues here. And so many of my colleagues who preceded me have mentioned so much of the good work that we're doing and planning to continue to pursue in this Congress. But I thought I would focus on one thing of specific interest to me, and I know many people on the call. I'm the vice chair of the Armed Services Committee, and as you can see, aircraft carrier on the wall behind me, we build all the carriers and half the submarines in coastal Virginia, where I live in the district I represent. But just wanted to reiterate the importance of the U.S.-Israel relationship and our continued security assistance to Israel and assistance for missile defense, and to end the malign influence of Iran in the region. And I see my colleague Lee Zeldin is here, and we worked on some legislation last Congress, which I hope to push forward again this time to end the influence of Hezbollah in Lebanon. And I know that it's really on the forefront of everyone's mind that we need to work vigorously to stop Iran in their pursuit of a nuclear weapon. So, those are some things that I thought I'd mention because I think they're very important in the work that we're doing. And I know that my colleagues here are looking forward to continuing that strong support for our strongest ally in the Middle East. And it's just great to be with you, and wishing everyone a healthy Passover as well.
Sorry about that. I clicked the wrong box. Happens to the best of us. Thank you so much, Representative Luria. It's my pleasure to now invite Representative Ted Lieu to please turn on his camera.
Hello. Want to thank ADL and the Jewish Council for Public Affairs and the Jewish Federation of North America for putting together this wonderful event. I did want to give a shout out to Jewish Federation. It's a reason I went to Israel for the first time. You took my wife and me on a wonderful trip. And I'm currently on the Foreign Affairs Committee and the Judiciary Committee, and I'm going to talk about two issues on each committee I'm working on. On this Foreign Affairs Committee, there is an issue of assignment restrictions. So that is, some State Department employees get assignment restrictions where they can't work on certain countries. This could affect, for example, Jewish Americans and having an assignment restriction related to Israel, or a Chinese American with an assignment restriction related to China. So we want to find out more about why the State Department gives the assignment restrictions and whether those are legitimate or not. Another issue I'm working on is making sure that Israel receives their military and other support that it needs to maintain its qualitative military edge in a very dangerous part of the world. It also turns out that Israel is one of the leaders in the world on laser technology. And so I authored legislation that was included in the National Defense Authorization Act last year that has the United States and Israel partner on laser technology to find better ways to shoot down rockets and missiles. And then on the Judiciary Committee, we held a hearing on the rise of white supremacy, and it's a very important issue that I'm working to combat. And as you know, not only have there been an increase in hate crimes against the Jewish American community, but also against the Asian American community, as Congressman Lowenthal pointed out. I do want to thank JCPA for the solidarity letter in support of the Asian American community, and ADL for your great work on combating Asian hate, as well as the activities by the Jewish Federation with regards to combating hate crimes. Second issue I'm working on the Judiciary Committee has to do with facial recognition technology. As some of you may know, this technology doesn't work quite as well with people of darker complexion. So the darker your skin is, the more inaccurate facial recognition is. So in addition to privacy concerns, if we deploy this technology nationwide in various police departments and other agencies, to me, it's a mass equal protection violation if certain groups of people get less accurate readings. And so I'm working on legislation to put in rules and regulations to make sure we don't have that happen. So look forward to working with all of you, and thank you again so much for having this wonderful event.
Thank you so much, Representative Liu. I believe that the CEO of ADL, Jonathan Greenblatt, and the CEO of JFNA, Eric Finger, have also wanted a moment with you.
Hi, Congressman Liu. It's good to see you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I think all of us are grateful. You know, if I might just ask a quick question since we have you here. As you mentioned, we've all been watching the horrible attacks against elderly Asian Americans in Oakland, in San Francisco, in New York. All of us are outraged. And these are happening, at least in part, I think, because of the demonization of minority communities that has conditioned the environment for these types of attacks. What can we do as the Jewish American community to support our brothers and sisters in the AAPI community? What would you like to see?
Thank you so much for your question, and thank you for all the work that's already been done and your shows of solidarity through letters and other actions. I think it's important to just raise the issue. You know, there are a number of members of Congress who don't have districts where there's a lot of Asian Americans, and it's not something they think about. And so simply highlighting that these hate crimes are occurring and these hate incidents are occurring, I think is important. Having awareness is extremely important. And then telling people where they can report these crimes and these incidents. So as you know, Stop AAPI Hate is a place for reporting, but just getting people to be aware that they can report these incidents and to track the data. And then fighting back against white supremacy and white supremacist groups, which you all have a long history of doing. Those are some of the actions. And then getting more resources to not just the federal government for prosecutors and prosecutors at local level, but also resources to nonprofits to fight back against hate.
Congressman Liu, on behalf of the Jewish Federations of North America, we join our colleagues and friends at ADL and with you in the strongest possible condemnation of the attacks that we've seen on the Asian American community and pledge our support. Of course, there are many Jewish Asian Americans as well, who you know well, who are working closely together this issue. Congressman, we're very proud that you're the co-chair of the Task Force on Anti-Semitism, and you've been very active in this area, working with us on the IRA definition and on the hate crimes legislation. I just would like to ask you what prompted your leadership in this area, why this is an area of such concern to you, and what your top priorities are in fighting anti-Semitism.
So here's a fun fact. It just so happens that my college fraternity, I'm a Sammy, a Sigma Alpha Mu. And I guess it's karma. All of a sudden, I now represent a district that also has a large number of Jewish American communities. And I've seen the effects of anti-Semitism, not just in other places, but also in my community, where synagogues get defaced, where you have Nazi symbols put on various temples, where Jewish Americans get assaulted. And so combating anti-Semitism has always been very important to me. And, you know, I like, you know, dealing with all issues, but I get a kick out of dealing with civil rights issues and issues that push back against hate, issues that protect Americans and in terms of making sure that they're not discriminated against. That I have a passion for. And so I'm very honored to be one of the co-chairs of the bipartisan task force to combat anti-Semitism.
Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you, Congressman, and thank you, Eric and Jonathan. As always, your leadership is appreciated. Thank you so much. Coming up next, I'd like to invite Representative Susan Wild to please turn on your camera.
Hello, everybody. I've been listening with interest to my colleagues, and it's particularly interesting in these Zoom times when we see things on our schedule and then we go to the Zoom event and we find our colleagues on them as well. And so I'm just happy to be part of this group, and I'm in particular very grateful to the ADL, the Jewish Council for Public Affairs, and the Jewish Federations of North America. You all do critical work day in and day out, and I thank you for your efforts, including when it comes to combating the resurgence of anti-Semitism that has struck far too many communities across our country. As we turn the page from 4 years that I believe were defined by an alarming rise in anti-Semitism, xenophobia, and division, I really want to make sure that we are as vigilant as ever. The COVID pandemic has seen the return of old forms of anti-Semitism, scapegoating the Jewish community in a time of crisis. And as we just heard from my colleague, Ted Lieu, obviously scapegoating the Asian community as well. And hate is hate, just as love is love. And we have to make sure that we are standing with our Asian colleagues and people. But, you know, we've also seen the scapegoating of Jewish and Asian communities and repurposing ancient conspiracy theories designed to pin blame on Jews. We saw repulsive examples of that in the January 6th attack on the Capitol. So as a Jewish member of Congress, I will tell you right now, I will never back down in saying that this cannot stand. It cannot stand. Symbols of anti-Semitism, white supremacism, and xenophobia simply cannot stand in the United States Capitol, in the United States, or anywhere else. When it comes to countering anti-Semitism around the world, I'm happy to tell you that I recently joined with Representative Grace Meng to call on President Biden to expeditiously nominate an ambassador at large to monitor and combat anti-Semitism. Working with the administration, I am hopeful that our nation will once again prioritize the fight against anti-Semitism everywhere, including with regard to governments like the Viktor Orban regime in Hungary. And you can probably tell that I'm a member of House Foreign Affairs Committee by citing regimes that aren't necessarily, don't necessarily roll off the tongues of everybody in this country. But we have to fight anti-Semitism everywhere, because to allow it anywhere is an affront to all of us. As a community, the Jewish community will continue to stand strong as we fight to build an America free of all forms of bigotry. And yes, I still do believe that that is a worthy aspiration and a goal that can be accomplished. It will take time, it will take effort, and it will take vigilance. But we have to be an America that is defined by common aspirations, not by hatred. I couldn't be prouder to be part of that effort. And over this next term in Congress, I intend to do everything I possibly can as a member of Congress to wage the fight for inclusion, justice, and equity in every aspect of our domestic and foreign policy. Thank you so much for having me this evening.
Oh, thank you, Representative Wild, for being here. We really appreciate the time and your wonderful words. Thank you so much. Next up, I'm pleased to ask Representative Raskin to please turn on his camera. Sir, you are on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes.
Good. Hello, Deb, and hello to all my friends at ADL and JCPA and the Jewish Federations. I'm on my iPhone, so I don't quite know who's there. I can't see everybody, but I'm hoping Jonathan Greenblatt is there, and Eric Fingerhut, and my friend Ron Halber, and maybe Barbara Goldberg Goldman, so I'm not sure, but I'm delighted to be with all of you. And I thought I would just say a word about the way I'm thinking about my priorities thematically coming out of the January 6th events. I'll never forget the sound of basically a battering ram up against the door of the House of Representatives as a mob filled with Proud Boys and racists and anti-Semites and Holocaust revisionists and white nationalists tried to storm the House of Representatives. And for me, that moment captured really the necessity of the agenda going forward, because I think we can either lapse back into the direction we were on, which was to become a failed state on the road to right-wing authoritarianism, or we can get back on the road of constitutionalism and constitutional patriotism and strong democracy. So we know that anti-Semitism and racism are the gateway to destruction of democracy, and they are the road to authoritarianism and a failed state. And I think that our agenda has to be both explicitly combative against racism and white nationalism and anti-Semitism. In my capacity as the chair of the Oversight Subcommittee on Civil Rights and Civil Liberties, for the last few years, we have been working hard to investigate the causes of this violent extremism, and specifically the infiltration of law enforcement entities, police departments, state, local, and federal law enforcement by racist groups. And I sent a letter yesterday to the director of the FBI because of new revelations about FBI awareness of deliberate infiltration of law enforcement by racist groups. So that's one thing I think we have to get very serious about. There were 18 law enforcement or military people who were arrested in the January 6th attacks, which is really shocking when you think about it and when you think about the attack on law enforcement that took place. But the other part of it is a positive agenda. We've got to make democracy work. And I'm proud about what we were able to enact today, the $1.9 trillion COVID relief program to defend and expand science and vaccination and to invest in the society. And the legislation that we did around gun violence for universal violent criminal background check in all gun sales and gun purchases. But generally, we've got to make democracy work so we don't have the kind of alienation and disaffection that become a breeding ground, either in reality or in cyber reality, for conspiracy theory and racism and anti-Semitism and movements trying to tear down the government. So those are my priorities. I'm thrilled to have great colleagues in Congress that I get to work with, and also to work with all of you, as the crucial effort is in civil society itself to strengthen the bonds of solidarity and affection that will be the best antidote to right-wing authoritarianism in our century. And I yield back, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Representative Raskin. Thank you for taking the time to be here. And I just want to say thank you so much to all of the representatives who are on the line today. We are trying to accommodate some very tight schedules and conflicts. I just want you to know exactly how much we appreciate your patience and your participation. And with that, without further ado, I would like to invite Representative Lee Zeldin to please turn on your camera.
Well, thank you, Deb, and thank you to ADL, to Jewish Federations, for JCPA. It's great to be with you, and to I'm here representing one half of the Jewish Republican caucus in Congress. Our numbers are rapidly growing. We're up to 2 members now, and I appreciate the invite, and have so many of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle here. I believe in 2 important principles to point out. One is that we should all be working with the strongest amount of bipartisan support possible to combat anti-Semitism in all of its forms, as well as standing strong shoulder to shoulder with our nation's great ally in Israel. To that point, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, my colleague, was speaking a little bit earlier. We co-host the annual bipartisan Hanukkah party. If anyone is back in DC, we did it virtual this past December, but we're looking forward to doing it again in person. And Congresswoman Elaine Loria, we have the PTSD Research Act, which is close to our hearts. Both of us had served in the military, and I see my colleague Brad Schneider on the call. Last Congress, we had a really great bipartisan vote on a resolution to oppose BDS. And it was great to work with Brad and to see so many of my other colleagues here on so many causes. Debbie and I also are co-chairs of the Congressional Black Jewish Caucus, which she pointed out. We've had some other wins, signing the Taylor Force Act into law, securing diplomat status for the special envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism. Certainly a lot of work still ahead. I'd like to see more bipartisan support of the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, to see our country more fully adopt the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism. And the only way for us to get all of our priorities over the finish line on so many different bills that we are all passionate about is by working together. Strong bipartisan support, combating anti-Semitism, supporting the U.S.-Israel alliance. And it sends a strong message to the country when we are finding ways to work together. And I think that's what the average American wants, is to see us working together more, bicameral, bipartisan, to the maximum extent possible. So thank you to your organizations for your leadership, for your passion, for your advocacy. I believe that the Jewish community is best represented with how strong and passionate you take your job with such strong focus. And I look forward to working with you all. And knowing that I have a few colleagues here coming on after me, I'll just leave it there and say happy Passover. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Zeldin, and happy Passover to you as well. Thank you for being with us this evening. Next up, I would like to invite Representative Brad Sherman to please turn on his camera. Oh, there we go.
And I'm off mute as well. Hello, I'm Congressman Brad Sherman from America's best named city, Sherman Oaks. I want to thank all three organizations for inviting me here today. I'm glad that Lee joined us and that this is a bipartisan meeting. I couldn't agree with Jamie Raskin more that we need to focus on racism and anti-Semitism infiltrating our law enforcement organizations. Today, we passed a $1.9 trillion bill, and Steve Cohen is right. It's a very Jewish bill, not because it's going to provide benefits to a disproportionately small number of Jewish families, but it reflects Jewish values and will bring half the children in the United States who are in poverty today out of poverty. And I joined Ted Lieu in his concern for racism against the Asian and Pacific Islander communities, and have been a member of the AAPI caucus in order to fight that for many years. Today, Secretary Tony Blinken came before the Foreign Affairs Committee, and I had a chance to get him on the record on Iran. And he gave just the right answers. He said very clearly that we are not going to make concessions to Iran just to get them to come to the table, and that we are not going to reduce or eliminate sanctions unless they comply with the limits on their nuclear program. The $3.8 billion that we provide Israel is the best for their security needs, is the best investment we make in America's security. It is less than 0.5% of what we spend on our security. And in return, we have a powerful ally and a real partner when it comes to intelligence. That's why I always remind people this is the Obama Memorandum of Understanding. I want to thank ADL for helping me with the Peace and Tolerance in Palestinian Education Act to require the Secretary of State to submit a report to Congress reviewing the curricula and textbooks used by the Palestinian Authority. We must make sure that U.S. assistance is not used to propagate anti-Semitism. Global anti-Semitism is a concern. In order to fight anti-Semitism, we need to define it. Our community has united behind what is the Holocaust Organization's definition, which is also the State Department definition. And I support the State Department definition of anti-Semitism, not only because it's accurate, but because my wife wrote it when she prepared the report on global anti-Semitism, serving as Deputy Special Envoy on global anti-Semitism. One of the many things I'm proud that she's done at the U.S. State Department. Domestically, a lot of us have joined in supporting robust funding for the Urban Area Security Initiative, which provides grants to synagogues, Hillels, and others who might be targeted, and obviously not just Jewish organizations, to seek gurdwaras and to Hindu temples, etc., to protect them from violent attack. ADL's most recent audit of anti-Semitic incidences, I don't have to tell you, shows a 12% increase over the previous year. Los Angeles has used $68 million in grant funding last year to help protect vulnerable and targeted organizations. I'm working with Adam Schiff, and I believe he's coming on soon, to secure language that would permanently put in our statutes what has been kind of a year-to-year extension of the Lautenberg Amendment. And we're trying to put this in Biden's immigration bill. This important program has brought tens of thousands of Jews to the United States, first from the Soviet Union and then from Iran, and simply in the modern context makes a clear presumption that Jews, Baha'is, and Christians in Iran are subject to oppression. We're working to limit guns, which of course pose a threat, particularly in the hands of domestic terrorists, both to concealable and plastic guns, the gun show loophole, and magazines of excessive length, excessive numbers of bullets. So I want to thank you. I'm Congressman Brad Sherman from Sherman Oaks, and I've represented most of the San Fernando Valley for about 2.5 decades. And I even represent a small corner of Burbank, but the majority senior member of the Burbank delegation will be speaking to you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Representative Sherman. We appreciate your being here. Next up, I'd like to please invite Representative Nadler to turn on his camera.
Hi, let me start off by saying Chag Sameach and Azis Pesach to everyone. And it's always good to see you, even if this year only virtually. 2,000 years ago, the great sage Hillel said, if I am only for me, then what am I? And if I'm only for myself, then what's the, then if I'm only for myself, then what am I? And if I'm only for my, and if not now, when? That's establishing the Jewish tradition of caring about everybody, of caring about everybody, of doing whatever we have to do to heal everybody's. So that's why, and as a senior Jewish member of the House and the member with the largest Jewish constituency, I feel particularly obligated here to protect everyone, as Hillel said, and that's why we have to protect Israel against Iran and any other enemy. That's why we have to protect the LGBT community. That's why we have to protect against racism of any sort. That's the overall view. And that's why we've taken so many of the actions we have. We've taken actions on voting rights. We've taken actions on LGBTQ equality. We've taken actions on all sorts of the safety of Israel, obviously, the success of the U.S.-Israel partnership, and we will continue to do so. And again, I thank the ADL for continuing to be a leader in this fight.
Thank you, Representative Nadler, and Azizin Pesach to you as well. Thank you for being with us this evening. Next up, I'd like to invite Representative Brad Schneider to please turn on his camera.
I think I'm on.
You are.
All right. Hello, everybody. How are you? Jerry Nadler took my line. I love the quote. I'll do the Hebrew. Imeanani li mili raklatz mimani im lo akshav imatai. If I'm only for myself, if I'm not for myself, who will be? If I'm only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? And I think that, Jerry, thank you for calling our attention to that, because that is not just who we are as a people, it is what the moment demands of us at this time. There are so many challenges we face here in our country and across our world. But as a people, it is groups like ADL, JFNA, JCPA, and all the groups that are a part of JFNA or JCPA that are at the vanguard of so much of this. So thank you for all you're doing. I'm Brad Schneider from Illinois' 10th District, the northern suburbs of Chicago. And we have seen, certainly over the last several years, but no point perhaps more poignantly than on January 6th, the rise of hate, of bigotry, of racism, of anti-Semitism, of what the FBI calls the greatest threat we face, domestic violent extremism, but within that, it is racially and ethnically motivated violent extremists, RMBEs, and in particular, white supremacists. And there's no question that, as others have said, when they hate, they may hate some groups, but they all hate the Jews. And we saw that on the shirts that said Camp Auschwitz, 6 million is not enough. We saw it in Charlottesville, Jews will not replace us. And that's why the work that we do, that you all do, is so critically important. I'll talk very briefly about a bill that I'm working on with my good friend Jerry Nadler as chairman of the Judiciary Committee. My colleague in the Senate, Dick Durbin, who introduced it there. It's called the Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act. At a time when domestic violence is on the rise, when racially and ethnically motivated violent extremists and other extremist groups are threatening literally our very government and attacking and for a period occupying our capital, the need to empower our federal law enforcement, the FBI, Department of Justice, Department of Homeland Security, with the ability to identify the threats, to monitor them, and then to take action to keep Americans safe by interdicting these threats before they become reality, can't be overstated. So our bill would establish formal offices in each of the FBI, DOJ, DHS, would empower these offices to work together, give them the resources for training, staffing and training to make sure they have what they need, and would require them, because transparency is important, would require a report to Congress and through Congress to the American people twice a year about the assessment of the risks, the actions they're taking to protect us, any prosecutions or convictions that they have, so that the American people can know that these offices are tracking terrorists, are monitoring terrorists, tracking threats and keeping us safe, but not abusing their power. The bill actually passed the House last September with overwhelming bipartisan support. Went to the Senate, was blocked there. We reintroduced it last month. It is bipartisan again. I was joined by 3 Democrat and 3 Republican colleagues on introduction. We are adding new colleagues. But let me be very clear, we have to call out the hate that we see. We have to call out racism when we see it, white supremacists when we see it. To turn our eye or to, out of fear, not be able to say what the threat is and what undermines it means that we're not able to stop it, not able to address it, not able to keep us safe. It's not a Republican issue. It's not a Democratic issue. It is an American issue. And in the context of our gathering tonight for the ADL, JFNA, and JCPA, it is a Jewish issue, but it is a Jewish issue in the context of Hillel. Yes, we have to look out for ourselves, but we have to look out for our fellow citizens and our neighbors, and our nation as a whole. So again, thank everybody for your support. I thank ADL and JUF in Illinois for their support of DTPA, and wishing everybody a very happy, healthy Passover, and may we all get through and celebrate together sometime soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Schneider. And from your mouth to God's ear, we should all be celebrating together in person soon, next year in person.
Amen.
All right, coming up next, I'd like to invite Representative Auchincloss to please turn on his camera. Oh, he's beat me to it. Thank you so much. Welcome.
Thank you for having me on. It's a privilege to be here with colleagues and organizations that I respect so much. And some of these colleagues may disagree with me on this, but I think I represent in the Massachusetts 4th, the most vibrant and diverse Jewish constituency in the country, centered on my neighbors in Brookline and Newton and Sharon, Massachusetts. I take inspiration from them in their clarion call of healing the world. They do so through their commitment to social services, through their resolve to standing up to hate, hate based on race, creed, origin, sexual identity, and unfortunately, increasingly hate based on anti-Zionism and vitriol directed towards the state of Israel. And they heal the world through vigorous, robust political engagement with much debate and a healthy civic discourse. Through that political engagement, I share many of the priorities that my colleagues have touched upon here. The one that to me increasingly rises to the top of mind is not a piece of legislation, but an aspiration. Voltaire said that those who can make us believe absurdities will make us commit atrocities. And too many of our fellow Americans believe absurdities right now because of our fragmented and demagogic media landscape, because of politicians who would rather stoke rage than unite and govern. We have too many people who are divorced from reality. And unfortunately, there is a long and sorrowful history in the Jewish community that whenever people become divorced from reality, whenever they become slaves to demagogues, that anti-Semitic atrocities are sure to follow behind. We have got to find a way in this new landscape of information based on cable news and social media and radio to regain our shared reality, to reset ourselves in common facts, to recommit ourselves to truth and have a conversation based on the facts on the ground, because that in the long run to me is going to be the surest barrier to hate and to anti-Semitism. Happy Passover to all. It's an honor to be here, and I look forward to seeing you all in person over the coming year.
Thank you so much, and happy Passover to you as well. Next, it is my pleasure to invite Representative Kathy Manning to please turn on her camera.
Hello, Deb. How are you?
It's so good to see you. I'm trying to be cool, but it's just so wonderful to see you in this role.
It is great to see you in your new role as I'm taking on my new role. So for those of you who don't know me, I was the first woman to be chair of the board of JFNA and have worked with many of these organizations, many of your organizations for many, many years. And it's a little bit strange for me to be on this side of the presentation right now, but I'm happy to tell you that so much of what I've been able to do in my short 2 months here is completely aligned with our Jewish values, the things that we have worked so hard for in these three great organizations. And I thought I would take just a few minutes to give you a snapshot of what I have been doing other than running from insurrectionists from the gallery of the House on January 6th. I just finished participating in a hearing held by the Foreign Affairs Committee, where I think Brad Sherman talked about it briefly. I was in that hearing also, and I am the vice chair of the subcommittee on the Middle East, North Africa, and nuclear proliferation. And as Brad mentioned, our witness today was our new Secretary of State, Tony Blinken. He was kind enough to stay with us for almost 4 hours. He was originally scheduled for, I think, 2 hours, but he understood that everybody wanted to get to ask their questions. And Brad did, in fact, ask him about Iran, as did every other Jewish member and many non-Jewish members, to the point that when I finally got to ask my question, I just basically thanked him for his repeated and emphatic commitment, not only to preventing Iran from becoming a nuclear power, but also his commitment to address Iran's malign behavior in fostering and supporting terrorism in the Middle East and around the globe. I also had a chance to ask him about his commitment to combat the global rise of white supremacy and anti-Semitism, and he said that this is something that is deeply important and personal to him. I asked him about his approach to working with the Israelis and the Palestinians, and he said he is a strong supporter of the two-state solution because he believes that it's the only way for Israel to remain both Jewish and democratic state. So he couldn't have been stronger on the issues that we care so deeply about, and it gave me great confidence in this new administration. In addition to serving on the Foreign Affairs Committee, I also serve on the Education and Labor Committee, and we all know the importance of education in transforming lives. We know how important it is as Jews and how important it is to the future of our country. And a significant portion of the money in this wonderful American Recovery Act that we just passed today is going to K through 12 schools and colleges and universities to shore up the education that our kids across this country are getting. I think about $357 billion worth of this $1.9 trillion Recovery Act is had to go through the Education and Labor Committee. So there's some great priorities in this bill. I'm proud that we recently passed the Equality Act because discrimination against anyone is something that we as Jews cannot tolerate and should fight against. That's exactly what this bill does. We also passed the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. This is a real start to changing the horrifying police behaviors that we have become all too accustomed to seeing in our country, and I'm proud that we passed that bill. This week, we're going to pass 2 important background check bills. This is the start to getting some eradication of the gun violence that has been ravaging this country for far too long. I am also on the leadership team of the New Dems. The New Dems are the pro-business moderate Democrats, and I've been able to take the lead on working on the U.S. Citizenship Act. It's one of the 3 immigration bills that we're working on, something that's personal and important to me, both as an immigration attorney, but also as a Jew. And I'm hoping that this is something that we will be able to have some broad immigration reform moving forward. I think it's an issue that's important to so many people on this call. Lastly, my team and I are also working to address the frightening problem of the rise in white supremacists in this country, something that really has been ignored for too long. It's a critical issue. We saw it in living color during the insurrection on January 6th. And I, of course, can't wait to support Brad's bill. Our bill is a slightly different approach. And whichever bill gets passed, it's long past time for us to address the rise of violent white supremacists in this country. So that's what I've done so far here. It's really a pleasure to be able to be working on behalf of not just the Jewish community, but the American public. And I think we are doing things that are so needed all across our country. So let me stop because I know there's some more people waiting to speak. Let me just wish you all a Chag Sameach and a meaningful Pesach. And thank you for having me tonight.
Chag Sameach, Kathy. And before we let you go, I believe that Eric Fingerhut did want a moment to say something.
We're running late, Kathy. We're so proud of you. We're so proud to have the former chair of the Jewish Federation of North America in Congress. We love you. Thank you for your leadership. And we're particularly proud of your bipartisan leadership in support of the state of Israel and fighting anti-Semitism, standing up against hate crimes, and all the good work you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. When you all come to my office, you will see the beautiful letter you and Mark Wilf sent to me when I was elected is framed and is in my office. So thank you so much.
And thank you both. And thanks to everyone for being so patient. I'm so pleased that you've stuck with us. Coming up next, and our final, we've maybe saved the best for last, I'm pleased to introduce Representative Lois Frankel. Lois, please turn on your camera.
Oh, there we go. I think, hi, everybody. I'm on my cell phone in a friend's home and a lot of noise in the background. And so I'll try to make this quick. And thank you all for not only your good work, for your patience listening to so many members. I'm going to just give a little different perspective. I'm the co-chair of the Democratic Women's Caucus. And so I spend a lot of time on issues to advance women and girls. And when I came into Congress, I came in and I still am the mother of a United States Marine War veteran. And I decided to get on Foreign Affairs Committee because I wanted to make sure that if I ever had a vote to send another child, someone else's child to war, I would know what was going on. And as a result, I've traveled all over the world, and now I sit on the Foreign Ops, the subcommittee that funds the State Department and Israel and so forth. And here's what I learned as I travel around the world. And when you get to travel, it's not to vacation spots, to areas that really have a lot of violent extremism. I have been in Egypt and Tunisia and Iraq and Afghanistan, Jordan, and of course Israel, which was peaceful when I was there. But here's what I've learned is that when women and girls, when they have access to education, to healthcare, to safety, and to resources, their communities are much more prosperous and much more secure. And women play such a big role in trying to, in the area of extremism. And that's why Mike Walsh, who is a Republican, and we started a caucus, the Women, Peace and Security Caucus, because we realize what an important role that women play as mothers, as sisters, as wives, in tamping down or sometimes instigating violent extremism. So anyway, I hope you follow our efforts. I thank you all for what you do. And probably some of you, if you're not my constituent yet, here in South Florida, you will be. And I wish you all staying safe, and thank you for the opportunity to be with you tonight.
All I know, it had nothing to do with the First Amendment.
Thank you so much, Representative Frankel. We appreciate your patience and we really appreciate your being here. I'm so pleased to be able to invite the leaders of the organizations who are hosting us this evening to say a few words tonight. Jonathan Greenblatt, CEO and National Director of ADL, Eric Fingerhut of the Jewish Federations of North America, and Melanie Gorelick from JCPA. I believe, Jonathan, you are slated to start us off.
Great. Thank you, Deb. This evening has already been longer than a House Foreign Affairs hearing. So I'm just going to be brief. And number one, thank all the members for joining us tonight. I think it says so much about the American Jewish community and its diversity and richness that we're so well represented in Congress. It's really quite a wonderful thing. I also want to thank everyone for sticking with us tonight, none more so than my good friend, Eric Fingerhut, our partners at Melanie Gorelick, and our partners at JCPA as well. I'm so proud that ADL is working hand in hand with these organizations, and I think there's more to do on that front. And finally, I think one of the themes we heard throughout this evening was that the threat of anti-Semitism, the issue that ADL was founded in order to defeat, the threat of extremism and hate remain clear and present dangers for the Jewish community and for our country. We are living in perilous times, and we are committed to every single day doing the best that we can through analysis, through responding to incidents, through collaborating with government to respond to these threats and keep our community safe. And with the support of the federal government, these members of Congress, the administration, as well as elected officials at the state and local level, I believe we can do just that. So thank you everyone again. And I would just echo the words of so many and say, Happy Pesach, and may you all have a wonderful spring.
Thank you, Jonathan. And I want to echo as well your comments about the partnership that we're so proud to have between the Jewish Federations of North America and ADL, and to our friend Melanie, JCPA as well. I want to acknowledge David Golder, who's the chair of the JFNA Domestic Policy and Government Affairs Committee, who was intended to lead a panel discussion amongst us and has been so patient through this whole event, but is such a strong leader for our system. David, thank you for being part of this evening, even if our panel didn't materialize. And I also know that our board chair, Mark Wilf, has been listening to this and participating in this entire program. So Mark, thank you for that as well. And finally, acknowledge our friends and partners at Jewish Insider and Melissa Weiss. Thank you, Jewish Insider, for helping organize and sponsor this event, and I'm sure giving it good and important coverage. Our work at Jewish Federations of North America across 146 federations is to build flourishing communities that are healthy, safe, caring, welcoming and inclusive, educated and engaged, deeply involved in our broader communities around us and connected to the Jewish people in the state of Israel and around the world. As you said, Jonathan, how proud we are that in this great country of the United States, that has, through its protection and its freedoms and its open civil society, has enabled the Jewish community to flourish as never before in the history of our people. That so many Jewish leaders are giving back to our democracy by service in the United States Congress and in the administration and in so many other levels of government. They make us proud. They inspire us in their bipartisan approach, not only to the issues of concern to the Jewish community, but as each of them said, by creating the opportunities to lift up all Americans and give everyone the same opportunities that we all wish for every member of our very own community. Thank you all for your patience tonight and for listening and for honoring these great members of Congress, and wish everyone a happy Pesach. And we look forward to working together throughout this Congress and in the coming years. Melanie, over to you.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Jonathan. This was really a fabulous evening. It really beat our expectations of what we hoped tonight, to see so many legislators come together with leaders in the Jewish community to share all of our priorities. One thing we all have in common is our belief in tikkun olam, and we can see from the breadth of issues that people are working on that were discussed here tonight, that we all care about repairing the world and making the world a better place. So it was really wonderful to be part of this effort. I wanted to share to very quickly just remind us that we are in a moment where we are wanting to assure a strong, vibrant democracy, and that we're working for justice for all people. And we hope that as we move forward, that we will be able to urge all members of Congress to really keep racial justice as a priority issue, and that we should implement and strengthen full voting rights and help transform our criminal justice system. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. And it was wonderful to work with ADL and JFNA and our member agencies. And I'm going to pass over the floor over to Corey Shapiro, one of the co-chairs of JCPA's Policy Advisory Committee, just to close us out tonight.
Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight for this important briefing. Thank you, Jonathan, Melanie, and Eric, for your work and your presentation tonight and pulling this together, and all the staff at all the organizations. This effort to come together really shows how the Jewish community is working on all fronts and working so hard to fight anti-Semitism, bigotry, and hate, as well as to proactively support our consensus Jewish policy positions. It reinforces how our work complements each other, and we are all stronger together. Thank you so much to the members of Congress who joined us tonight and shared with us your remarks and your priorities. This level of communications and partnership is meaningful for achieving all of our goals to live in a country that ensures the safety and security of the Jewish people and of its diverse communities. Again, on behalf of ADL, JCPA, and JFNA, we want to thank all of you who tuned in and participated in tonight's program. We hope you found it meaningful, and have a very happy Pesach.